Now, the question of what reconciliation means is a difficult one. And those of you who've ever studied this in the course of your academic careers will know that achieving reconciliation is one thing, but defining it and so that you know what it is that you're trying to achieve is the real challenge to begin with. And so we intend on holding a forum in which we bring forward experts in the field to talk about this topic so that we can begin to get a handle around it. And those experts will not just be from institutions like this, academic institutions, but those experts will also be traditional elders who we are bringing to gatherings in which we will ask them, what does it mean to you for there to be a state of reconciliation achieved? What does it mean to you to be able to restore relationships to a proper state? How do you do that? What are the teachings around that from a traditional Aboriginal perspective? Because we think that perspective is just as valid as the professionals and the perspective that the professionals bring to the discussion. So those processes are going to take some time for us to evolve, but at the same time as they're going on, we also are talking to survivors. And the question that whenever the survivors address us and tell us their stories that we ask them is this: now that you've told us a story, now that you've told us what's happened to you, what is it that we can do about that? What is it that you would like us to do about that? What is it that you think can be done about that to make things right for you? What will it take? And sometimes that's the first time they've ever been called upon to think about that question. And that's not an easy question to answer, because while they feel the immense difficulty that comes with having been raised and put through an institutional environment, or they may have gone through a difficult experience as a result of being physically or emotionally or psychologically or sexually abused in the course of their youth, they are not able often to be able to point to what will it take to make this right. Is there anything that can be done to make this right? Sometimes the answer to that will have to be no. Maybe there isn't anything that can be done to make this right. But the question then becomes, well, what will it take to help you with what it is that you're facing? That's a different kind of question. And we are calling upon the survivors to consider that each time they do come forward and talk to us, because their answers will help us to point the way to reconciliation down the road. But reconciliation really does have to be considered at a number of levels, we believe. It has to be considered at the individual level, as I've just talked about, with the survivors themselves. Sometimes because there's no longer an abuser in the picture, sometimes the abuser's no longer alive, sometimes the abuser's disappeared for other reasons, they don't know where he is. The idea of having a reconciliation initiative in which you bring the abuser and the abused into the same room and have them confront and deal with each other sometimes doesn't work. So we have to look at different processes that will allow an individual to address their needs without the abuser or without the other person being in the room. Sometimes the victim, if I can call them that, the survivor, doesn't want to have to deal with the abuser in the same room or at the same time in the same place. Sometimes all they want is an acknowledgement of the validity of their complaint, the issue that they've raised. But at the same time, they want somebody to confront the person who did this to them, to be able to tell them that what they did was wrong, to be able to get them to acknowledge what they did was wrong, without they having to be there to see that. And so sometimes reconciliation will occur at a distance. So for the individual, reconciliation can occur in different ways, but there is a need for us to address reconciliation at an individual level. We know that. Reconciliation is not only important to the survivor, but it's also important to the abuser as well, because we have heard instances of those individuals who have committed a wrong against people at the schools who have, at a certain time in their life, come to a determination that they must relieve themselves of the guilt of that act. And in doing that, they feel they want to be able to share that sense of guilt, that request for forgiveness from the person that they have wronged. And so sometimes reconciliation is required on the part of the abuser as well. One of the things that we have discovered, and I don't think it was well anticipated during the course of the discussions about residential schools and the issue of abuse within the schools, is that one of the most significant areas of abuse that's coming forward now is student-on-student abuse. Student-on-student abuse is a situation where a child who's in the school is abused by another student in the school, sometimes without the knowledge or participation of anybody who works in the school. Student-on-student abuse is becoming a real issue. It's certainly a growing number. It's contributing to a growing number of claims that are made through the independent assessment process. But it presents significant challenges for the reconciliation process, because student-on-student abuse often has occurred between individuals of similar age and who are still alive and sometimes still within the same community, sometimes within the same family. And as a result of that, to get somebody who has been abused in that way to come forward and identify an abuser who may be now an elected leader or a respected elder in their community, to deal with them in a public way or even in a private way about the abuse that's occurred before them is a difficult process. So reconciliation of student-on-student abuse is probably going to be one of the most challenging areas for us. But at the same time, I think it's the most important part of reconciliation that we have to address, because it is the area of abuse that lingers the longest. It is the area of abuse, the area of difficulty that is most pervasive and is contributing most to community problems, because we need to be able to empower the survivors of that kind of abuse, to be able to empower them to overcome that, to deal with that in a more positive way than they are dealing with it. And for them to keep that kind of a situation within themselves and not be able to reconcile with it, not be able to address it properly in a way that gives them a sense of satisfaction or a sense of balance, means that their relationship with that individual who still is within the community that they reside or within their family environment, if they are unable to reconcile their relationship or restore their relationship, then that means that that abuse will go with them to the next world when they leave here. And their ability to cope with all of the problems in life are that much more difficult.